Hey guys, happy Love Day. Just as a reminder, anything we talk about today is not medical advice. Make sure that you are taking your own body and your own case into mind and maybe going and doing research and seeing if something applies to you. But just remember, like nothing is for diagnosis or treatment or any of that, just for education and inspiration. Hey Zainab. So, do you know of any accounts of people straightening impacted wisdom teeth through nutrition and or mechanical means, or have you personally experienced this? So, I personally got my wisdom teeth removed when I was very young. Obviously, I wish I would have just know what I knew now, but I have heard of people who practice mewing or really working on nose breathing, and then on top of it, like practicing pretty primal nutrition that includes plenty of saturated fats and fat-soluble vitamins and proteins and high-quality carbohydrates that have said that their impacted wisdom teeth weren't impacted anymore because their mouth moved. But that's the biggest thing is usually it's a structural issue. There's not enough room in the mouth for the wisdom teeth to develop properly. At least that's what Dr. Weston A. Price talks about. So I would definitely read up on his stuff. I know Dr. Mew, the Mewing guy, really has a lot of information on it. And you can read in a lot of comments of people who practice mewing that they've had complete mouth shifts happen. I feel good and have good temps after eating a banana with breakfast, but how do I differentiate between it working well or a stress response from the tryptophan and serotonin? I think if we're super stressed about tryptophan and serotonin being in our food, then we're just not going to be able to survive on planet Earth. I think like if we feel good, we don't really have to worry about anything. I don't really stress about eating a banana. If I like it and I want to eat it and it feels really good and my temps and pulses are good, I eat a damn banana. You know what I mean? I think there comes a point where we just need to like not stress about things that other people have told us about food. Like, yes, there's tryptophan in bananas. Yes, that can turn into serotonin in a stressed out body. But the reason that serotonin becomes a problem in the first place is because we are iron overloaded and we don't have enough bioavailable copper to regulate serotonin. So, is it really the chicken or the egg? I think it's just important to really focus on the bigger picture and not stress about every tiny little thing. It's going to really contribute to things getting worse, Besides starting off really slowly, how would you recommend reintroducing dairy? Which forms are best to start out? I think people should reintroduce however they feel comfortable with. I personally would probably go with the most denatured form I could get my hands on. So for me, I can get my hands on raw, and I was comfortable drinking raw dairy from the dairy that is near me. I did my research. They feed their cows correctly. They're very they practice proper safety measures. And so therefore that's what I chose. Goat's milk tends to be easier to digest, or A2 cow's milk, just because it doesn't have any polymorphisms of the casein protein. So I would probably start with goat's milk, or like goat's cheese, things like that, or like a raw Parmesan cheese or something like that. But sometimes we just have to do it and stop stressing about it. And most of the time we don't have reactions to it. I've seen a lot of people react to foods because they think they're going to react to foods. So it's just one of those things where like when we start to shift our mindset, but usually a sip of milk, at lunch every day for 2 weeks can really help build up that lactase enzyme. But it's also about what you're not eating. If there's a ton of irritating foods still in the diet, oftentimes dairy is still a problem for people, or if the gut's still really irritated. So those are things to kind of remember. I'm going to answer these pre-submitted questions really quick, and then I'll get to your questions, Zainab, on intermittent fasting. I haven't watched all your videos yet, so I don't know if you already answered this question. Is there any sunscreen that you recommend? Feels like it's the most difficult thing in the world to find. And is it only the polyunsaturated fats that makes your skin fried when out in the sun? How about jojoba oil and raspberry seed oil? I like to wear them in the sun, but I'm afraid it's no good. So personally, I don't wear sunscreen. I know that Cosma Beauty did like a really good story on sunscreen that you can go check out. But a lot of the new natural sunscreens are made with like nano zinc or zinc oxide, and these things reflect light, which obviously can be protective against the sun, but I am worried about it reflecting light into my skin and that causing an overexposure as well. Obviously, we just shouldn't be having overexposure to the sun. Like, wear a big floppy hat, cover up your body after a good amount of sun exposure. That's personally what I practice. Everyone has different thoughts on sunscreen, but I think everyone is so obsessed with sunscreen now because their tissues are full of polyunsaturated fatty acids and they're vitamin A deficient. And so their skin is interacting with the sun very, very poorly. That's kind of my mind, my mindset. I know that when people start to get polyunsaturated fats out of their diet and get their vitamin A levels up, all of a sudden they don't burn any longer in the sun and they're tanning in the sun because their body's interacting with the sun better. So I think our internal balance really affects how we interact with the sun. As for the jojoba oil and the raspberry seed oil, I'm no esthetician. I pretty much stay away from all seed oils on my skin. Jojoba is a more waxy oil, so I'm not as worried about it. And I actually really like to oil cleanse with it. But I like to leave saturated fats on my skin. And that's just my personal approach to it. But I think that saturated fats interact with the skin much better anyways than plant fats. What do you suggest for people that don't have the opportunity to eat every 3 to 4 hours but have gotten used to it and start to feel sick and lightheaded? I work in the operating room as a pediatric perfusionist and on case days don't have the opportunity to eat for 6 to 7 hours. Coming from my IF background, I didn't have a problem, but now that I eat breakfast right away and then eat every 3 to 4 hours when I'm not in the OR, I start to feel sick when I am. So I would just take my schedule and do the best I could. So if I can't physically eat something while I'm doing work, I'm going to figure out how to eat as soon as I get out of that work and right before I go into that work. So for example, I wouldn't be pushing my breakfast, 2 hours before I actually head into work. And then, now I have to not eat for 4 hours. And then, I got to prepare my lunch. I'd probably have a smoothie to sip on in between so that I can sip on something very easily when I have access to that smoothie. So I don't know exactly what your schedule is like, but this is where we have to get very innovative. I know that there are sometimes nurses, I know that there are plenty of OR nurses that follow me that have to be in the operating room for 7 to 8, 9 hours sometimes, or even longer. And so obviously you're just not going to be able to eat during that time, but I would prepare my body for that stress. So on the days that I'm not going long time without eating, I'm going to be very particular about getting my stress levels down, getting my blood sugar balance, eating a very, very nourishing bedtime snack the night before, and starting the day with a very large breakfast. I would probably honestly stuff myself full. I know that's kind of gross, or sometimes people are uncomfortable with that, but I would eat as much as I could. And I would probably aim to eat some slower digesting foods, a little bit more fat, because that's going to slow the absorption of the food over the course of the next 3 or 4 hours. If it's too low fat, the body's going to digest it a lot faster. So that's how I would approach it. There's no perfection. Perfection doesn't exist. And so some of us have jobs where we can't, eat every 3 to 4 hours. And so we have to do the best we can and kind of get a little bit innovative and creative. There's no wrong way. I think some of us are well, if we can't eat 3 to 4 hours, then we're screwed. And it's no, we just have to kind of get creative. And on the days where we can, we want to take advantage of it, if that makes sense. All right, last pre-submitted questions. I think I have thyroid issues, but not sure whether I'm hypo or hyper. I have difficulty gaining weight, easily cold, heavy feeling in the lower legs in the evening sometimes, sleeping issues, and heart palpitations, which both really improved already. Now I'm thinking to take desiccated thyroid from ancestral supplements, but I'm afraid it will make my heart palpitations act up again. Could you please advise me on this? Is taking a thyroid a good idea if you're not sure whether you're hyper or hypothyroid? So remember that hypothyroidism and hyperthyroidism is not a thyroid deficiency. It's not, that's not what we're deficient in. It's our body having a hard time either creating energy or using that energy. And usually it's both. And so that's the whole kind of methodology behind eating every 3 to 4 hours, providing your body with plenty of protein, carbs, and fats. That really helps your body create that energy. But then on the flip side, the energy, or the minerals and the nutrients that we talk about a lot, like magnesium, potassium, calcium, sodium, vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin K. All those nutrients help us use that energy that we're now creating. And so that's really where we need to hyper focus if we feel like we're hypo or hyperthyroid. I don't think taking a thyroid medication is going to fix the fact that we're not using energy well. This is why a lot of people will take something and then they stop it and they're like, oh, I feel worse. And it's because, well, we didn't actually fix the issue. So that's my mindset behind it. I think if things are improving by nourishing oneself, it's probably a good idea to continue to nourish oneself and to really focus on the fundamentals, and even really like get a little bit more hyper focused on things like vitamin C and all those fat soluble vitamins and minerals before jumping to just like desiccated thyroid. But that's just my personal opinion on the topic. Since stopping intermittent fasting and starting Pro-Metabolic, I've noticed that if I accidentally, LOL, go long periods, 4.5+ hours without eating throughout the day, I become nauseous. Yeah, this is kind of the transition, because see, when people are doing IF and they're really relying upon the adrenal glands, they don't have that hunger, or they're not as in tune with their body's signals. Their body's just kind of automatically switching over to running off of stress hormones. I remember this very clearly. Like, I used to be able to fast for 18, 20 hours and feel fine. I never felt hungry, felt really energized. And I thought like everything was dandy. But then when I started eating for my metabolism and started balancing my blood sugar, it was like a night and day difference. I literally, when I first switched over, I don't think I could go more than 2 hours without eating. And it's because my liver was so stressed out, it had a hard time storing sugar. A healthy liver can actually carry us through for about 8 hours if it can fill with glycogen. But when we do like keto or intermittent fasting, it takes such a heavy hit on the liver that the liver ends up having a really hard time storing up enough sugar to keep blood glucose stable. So usually when people are switching from like intermittent fasting and keto to really starting to increase their carbohydrates and increase their nutrients and getting a wide variety of pro-metabolic or metabolically supportive foods, they tend to see that like, whoa, I'm feeling really wacky, especially blood sugar, because blood sugars hasn't been regulated for a really long time. And to expect the body to just regulate blood sugar like that is really not a reasonable ask. Like, we have to give it a good, like, sometimes that's why I say 90 to 100 days to just really like let things settle down and see where our body's kind of like, I guess like laying at. Because when we're intermittent fasting, we're on one end of the scale. And then when we're, you know, doing pro-metabolic or increasing carbohydrates and eating every 3 hours, like our body has gone from this end of the scale all the way to this end. And we got to let it get back to this kind of balance in the middle. It just takes time and consistency and kind of just figuring out what works for the body. Remember that like taurine helps the body store sugar in the liver a little bit better. Making sure you're being really good about magnesium is very important. A lot of times when we're intermittent fasting, we're losing a lot of minerals. So, you know, magnesium, potassium, sodium, those are all really very helpful minerals that are going to be helpful in blood sugar balance as well. And then supporting the adrenals, you know, obviously like whole foods, vitamin C, those types of things. And then your of course, your nutrient dense foods like liver, oysters. Thoughts on the Zoe test? I've never heard of that. I'm not familiar with the Zoe test. Why does this happen? Because I've never experienced this before. Because you stress out your adrenals, stress out your liver. I hope I answered that question. How did they figure the restrictions for certain foods with the low FODMAP diet? Like they can't have apples, pineapple, but can have pine nuts, stevia, nuts, and seeds. Well, low FODMAP, so fructooligosaccharides and disaccharides, it's specific sugars. That's what FODMAP stands for. So like, I think it's fructooligosaccharides, disaccharides, something else like MAPS. And it's specific sugars or fibers, same, prebiotics pretty much they would be considered, found in certain plant foods. And so that's why they kind of give you a scale of like low FODMAP, medium FODMAP, you know, high FODMAP, because certain foods have more of these like sugar fibers or a variety of the sugar fibers like the FODMAP rather than just one or the other. But that's why like I don't think low FODMAP diets really are the answer, the end all be all. Obviously, if you have really bad bacterial overgrowth, you don't have enough copper to regulate the pathogens in your gut, of course, you're going to feel better restricting their food source, but that's not fixing anything. That's not fixing any root cause of anything. And so I think it's better to just adventure, figure out what foods work for you, and then work on balancing out those issues and ironing out those issues. So over time, you're able to tolerate more and more of those foods rather than stress about like, is this low FODMAP or not? I hope that makes sense. I heard you once talk about having black coffee or black tea when consuming liver, but I forgot why. Can you explain again? Thank you so much. Yeah, when you consume coffee or tea or any type of like things that have like phytates, that will actually bind to iron, so you don't absorb as much iron. And for most of us have really bad iron regulating issues and iron overload issues, just straight up iron overload. But I'm actually going through the root cause protocol right now, digging into the whole iron overload paradox. And it's just mind-blowing how bad our iron issues have gotten in society, and how we really do need to work to regulate our copper by, getting our vitamin A levels up, and really, ditching things like vitamin D that displace vitamin A in the liver and displace magnesium, and really working on our magnesium levels, very important. But since a lot of us have iron issues, or we're trying to actually get like our copper and our vitamin A up without increasing our iron, which, liver is an amazing source of copper and vitamin A, but it also does have some iron. Drinking black coffee or black tea with these foods helps bind to the iron, so we don't absorb as much. So yeah, iron is kind of like, in my opinion, the root cause of all disease. And a lot of us could do with like helping with the regulation of it a little bit better. Can you say how you would implement a systemic enzyme in a gut healing protocol? Yeah, so when it comes to systemic enzymes, the best way to take them is on an empty stomach. So usually that's going to be like right when you wake up. That's when I think it's probably the most effective. You can always wait until like a couple hours after breakfast, like right before you maybe do like your mid-morning snack or something like that. But I think like right when we wake up is better, and then waiting like a good 30 minutes, 45 minutes. But yeah, I mean, systemic enzymes, like you just take them on an empty stomach in the morning and let them kind of do their thing for 30 to 40 minutes. And usually I like to implement them pre-doing like antibacterials or antifungals to kind of break up the biofilms a little bit. Diatomaceous earth also does it really well. Obviously, systemic enzymes and diatomaceous earth are different things, and they're going to have different effects in the body. But yeah, I usually implement the systemic enzymes for about 3 to 4 weeks before implementing like herbs or things like that, parasite protocols, bacterial protocols, fungal protocols, those types of things. But they can be really effective for a lot of different reasons. I mean, obviously, it seems like they have a good capacity to break down fibrosis, as it at least seems. I remember in one of your lives, you mentioned a cause for it hurting when you scratch yourself, but I can't find which live it was. Mineral deficiency, inflammation, or like histamine issues, especially if you turn like really, really red, like you just have a tendency to be like really red, or when you scratch yourself, there's like really angry scratch marks. That's usually a sign of like histamine, of high histamine or histamine regulation issues. And then like there are people that like feel like things hurt, or they scratch themselves and it hurts, or their tummy or torso or even their legs and arms are like tender. And I think that has a lot to do with inflammation. So I think there can be like multiple causes, but yeah, I think that's what I was referring to. Sometimes I can't remember like what the context was, so I hope I'm answering correctly. If I don't get any PMS problems, could I still have estrogen problems? So some people their metabolism so slow and their body's protecting itself from the toxins or like estrogen issues, and that's kind of stuck in the tissues. So when they start to implement more metabolism supportive changes, estrogen starts to move, or when they implement progesterone or start making more progesterone, that increases estrogen movement, or increasing copper, eating a nutrient-dense diet like I teach in Fully Nourished, like that can really cause estrogen to move. So everyone's a little different. I don't necessarily think like I went through a period where I really had very little PMS symptoms, but I was still really messed up now that I look back. And when I did start to really eat for my metabolism, like my period got pretty bad for a couple of months before it got better again. So everyone's a little different, but some people do experience like an uptick in symptoms once they start to work on their metabolism. I remember, since eating the Fully Nourished way, I've had high blood sugar numbers. Any thoughts on why this could be? Yeah, we have to really work on regulating our blood sugar and figuring out the amount of protein, carb, and fat that works for us. So this is where like self-experimentation does come in. This is why like I constantly kind of remind you guys in Fully Nourished that like there's really no one size fits all, and I like to give you information and you can take that information and apply it to yourself. We don't want to just like go ham on eating so many carbs in one sitting without enough protein, or way too much protein. So really just figuring out what works for us. And a lot of times women need to increase their protein a little bit and figure out what ratio of carbs and fat works for them. Some women do better with like a little bit higher fat, and some women do better with a little bit higher carb. Another thing to consider is the type of carbs we're eating. Some women tend to, either out of just like laziness or not really knowing what to use, they really heavily lean on starches like potatoes and white rice. And sometimes we have to take a step back and say, oh no, I need to be doing more root vegetables like beets and sweet potatoes and maybe some more fruits and not as many starches. So, or not as many bread products, or maybe not as many processed refined carbs. So just kind of figuring out, like, this is where self-experimentation can really be very valuable, and figuring out what works best for us. If progesterone isn't rising naturally with following good eating habits, do you have to supplement? With what products? I've been trying to fix this for years. So, if progesterone isn't rising naturally, it is a good idea to get to the bottom of, are we ovulating or are we not ovulating? Then first of all, like, that's the question we need to ask ourselves. Like, if we're ovulating, then why aren't we ovulating well? It's usually a lack of nutrients, specifically like, we have magnesium, we have vitamin A, we have vitamin K, vitamin E, vitamin D, zinc, copper, like all those nutrients are super important. And a lot of times we're missing out on the foods that provide us those nutrients, like dairy and liver and oysters and bee pollen and raw honey. Like those are nutrients that are very important. So making sure that we're getting plenty of animal products that are really high quality and nutrient dense, those are what I love to call like fertility foods. Those are foods that nourish the female body. So if that's not working, I mean, we don't have to supplement anything. We can work on I always think that working on nutrients first is always a good idea. Maybe getting like a hair tissue mineral analysis, maybe getting like a full Monty iron panel and seeing like where nutrients are. Like vitamins A, your copper, your iron, and finding someone that knows how to read it. Those are all like helpful tools. Progesterone is sometimes like, it can be a very helpful tool. It's just not sometimes fixing the issue if we're having a hard time getting things up. For me, I was progesterone deficient for a very long time because I was eating way too little carbs, and I was actually at a too low of a body fat percentage. I'm surprisingly a little bit fluffier than I used to be, and I actually thrive a little bit better right here. And for me, I also was in the gym every day doing high intensity interval training and strength training. I was really pushing my body on top of like building a business and working a full-time job. So, for me, I was just putting my body under way too much stress, and everyone's stress is a little different, right? Like everyone has different types of stressors in their life, but it's a really good idea to try to peel back those layers and figure out what could possibly be driving stress, because most people who aren't making enough progesterone are often really stressed out, and their progesterone's turning into cortisol because it is a precursor to cortisol. Thoughts on borage seed oil or black cumin seed oil in skincare? I actually like black cumin seed oil, even sometimes internally. I don't think it's correct for everyone or right for everyone. I will preface that. I think everything has merit and context. But yeah, I think it can be very anti-inflammatory. It has some quinones in it. It's very effective at like breaking down biofilms, kind of anti-inflammatory for a lot of people. In skincare, like I personally just don't like putting volatile oils on my skin. But like if you're not going to be exposed to the sun when you put it on, it possibly has a maybe a good effect. I know it's probably popular. Personally, I just think it stinks. I'm not very as much familiar with borage seed oil. Also, suggestions for practitioners to work with individually if we need to. Yeah, so like Travis Harris NTP is really good. Meg Langston, really good. Innate Functional Nutrition or Loren, really good. I'm trying to think of others. Casey Goins, really good. There's a girl I follow, Maria Jean, very good. There's another girl, I forget her last name. I think it's like Brooklyn. If you go into the people that I follow and type that in, there's quite a few practitioners that I think have followed me for a while and did their research on Pro-Metabolic and have been really good about implementing it into their practice and pair that with some tests. And then I do know that a lot of people are in the root cause protocol with me right now. Most of the practitioners in the Pro-Metabolic space are actually, we're all in it together, learning about iron overload and regulating copper. So in the next couple months, I'm sure people will be taking on a lot more clients. I know Kiara Orb, I think that's her last name, is also a really, really good practitioner. How to determine if you're truly dairy sensitive, allergic, or if something else is causing it. You know, it's very, usually something else is causing it. Let's just be real. I mean, an allergy is different than a sensitivity. So first and foremost, figure that out. Because if you're allergic, like, don't consume it. But if it's a sensitivity, usually it's being caused by something else. There's a reason why we can't digest dairy. And that can be all types of issues. Sometimes it's stress. Sometimes it's our bacterial balance. We didn't get the right type of bacteria. Maybe we weren't breastfed, maybe we were cesarean born, maybe we ate really crappy growing up or went on a lot of antibiotics. There are a lot of factors that can affect our ability to digest dairy. And then there are other things that really mess with our microvilli, which are going to create the enzymes that help us break down dairy. That includes like progesterone levels, our thyroid levels, stress levels, and then iron is very, very harmful and damaging to the microvilli. It can really scar that tissue up. So sometimes it's just we have to really work on balancing our body as a whole without including a lot of dairy, or finding the types of dairy that work for us for a while. And then as our body starts to balance out, we can digest more and more dairy. For some people, their body is in such an imbalanced place, they need to just give it time. I think some people are like, when can I tie dairy in? When can I tie dairy in? And I'm like, you really just got to start focusing on getting the nutrients you need, the minerals you need. And if you really can't do dairy, you still need vitamin A. So maybe considering like a high quality cod liver oil, or if you can do liver is a great source of vitamin A. So just making sure you're also meeting the nutrient needs that dairy would provide. But yeah, it's sometimes can just be a process of elimination. Like some people just figure out like just dairy, I feel better not eating it. And then there's a lot of people that feel better eating it. They crave it like crazy. Their skin clears up when they eat it. They feel so much better. And so I think it's just getting to the bottom. But if you're eating a diet that's high in polyunsaturated fatty acids, you're eating tons of raw greens, tons of vegetables, tons of beans, tons of grains, tons of nuts and seeds, your gut's probably really irritated, and it's not a dairy sensitivity. It's probably just an intestinal irritation. So, you know, you kind of have to go down the line of like, if you're doing quote unquote everything right, you're really working on managing your stress, you're doing mindful movement, you're getting good sleep, you're eating, you know, high quality foods that work well for you, like meats, broths, eggs, you know, liver, organ meats, fruits that work well for you. You're eating really well, easily digestible foods, and dairy's still not working for you, then maybe it is like a true sensitivity. But most people are sensitive for other reasons. We don't just like randomly get a sensitivity to a food. What is the cause or possible causes of having high prolactin? You might find my IGTV episode on dairy really fascinating, or not dairy, on breastfeeding, really fascinating. And even if you're not someone who breastfeeds, remember that prolactin is a hormone that tends to be high when a woman is breastfeeding. But there's a reason for that, and it's usually to pull calcium from the bones and put it into the breast milk. And so a lot of people are not intaking high quality calcium, and they're really stressed out. And so therefore their prolactin is elevated. Now some people have they have like a pituitary gland tumor, which is kind of common. So usually when you have high prolactin, the doctor checks you for that. That's a good thing to explore and make sure you don't have. But yeah, usually it's the body reacting to stress. And because prolactin is manufactured mostly by the pituitary gland, oftentimes it's the body reacting to some type of stressor or trying to get calcium from the bones and the teeth to somewhere else. Hey Jess, when possible, how many raw oysters do you eat a week? When I can get raw, I usually get the guy that I get them from sells them by the dozen. So I usually just buy a dozen because they're super expensive. But that's and I try to eat them within the first couple of days just because they get kind of gross after a couple of days, like 6 days. I don't want to eat them anymore. So yeah, I would say when I buy them fresh, I eat a dozen. When I eat the can, I usually do 2 cans a week. Lately I've just been not into oysters. I don't know why. So I've been taking an oyster supplement, which I sometimes feel better getting the supplement in every single day. And then on the days that maybe I eat oysters, I don't supplement that day. I think there is something about getting those nutrients in every day that can sometimes work for some people. But yeah, I usually do 12 oysters a week, give or take. I don't really stress about the number though. What can be some negative consequences of root canals? I know they can go really wrong, but wanted your opinion. Yeah, so I've been following this holistic dentist for a while named Blodgett Dental Care. Dude, so worth following if you're interested in root canals or the possible negative connotations or consequences of root canals. Literally most of his job is just removing infected root canals and dead teeth, and he posts about all the nasty bacteria and parasites that can infect the jaw. And so people who have proliferant pathogenic infections that are not going away in the gut and they feel awful, I think a root canal is really worth exploring, an infected root canal. But I am by no means an expert on that. I like to follow experts and learn from them. But yeah, from my understanding, it's that when a root canal is done, oftentimes it's done incorrectly. And so bacteria can get in, and it can start to proliferate, and because the jaw is connected to the rest of the body, it can cause a systemic infection. But that's my basic and limited understanding. Thoughts on Monate hair skincare? I think it's kind of a scam. I'm not into MLMs as it is, but specifically MLMs that make some weird promises. But yeah, I personally I can't get behind it because sometimes I'll just get nerdy about it. And it's funny that you ask because I've been really fascinated by the phenomenon of Monate. I'm just fascinated that it's a thing, and what the promises that are being made. So I've watched a bunch of YouTubers that are pro Monate, and then I've also watched people that are exposing people that sell Monate. And bottom line is I even went through most of the product ingredients, and a lot of the ingredients are just cheap. Even the oil, I forget what it's called, it's Rejuvenique or something. I'm just these are cheap ingredients and you're selling this for $100. Why? It just, sometimes I just look at that stuff and I'm just no. If I want to spend money on skincare, I'm going to spend it with Cosma, and I'm going to spend it with healthy healthy hair forever. I love Noelle's brand. I love all her products, from Lush to Bloom to Mainstay. Like, all her products are super great, super well formulated. They work excellent. What are your thoughts on calcium D-Glucarate for estrogen detox? I mean, if you have, so the reason that calcium D-Glucarate works for some people is it helps break down this or lower this enzyme called beta-glucuronidase. And beta-glucuronidase is an enzyme that is made by bacteria in the gut that reactivates estrogen so it can get reabsorbed and reused by the body. So people who have elevated beta-glucuronidase benefit from calcium D-Glucarate because they have high beta-glucuronidase. But people who don't often don't see much benefit at all. I think that calcium D-Glucarate is kind of like a Band-Aid approach. I don't think it's actually going to fix much. It doesn't shift the gut bacteria or the microbiota. All it's doing is lowering an enzyme. So it may help, but it's not fixing the reason why we're not detoxifying it well. Like, it would be better to really work on our digestive capacity. But in the meantime, it can be a helpful tool. Does it make sense that the hair on my head falls out, but my armpit hair, leg hair, and pubic hair grows just as fast as normal? Also, my nails are in good shape. Yeah, I feel like that's pretty common for women who have like PCOS or hormonal issues. Even like women with PCOS often actually see their body hair growth like get faster and darker and coarser and thicker, and the hair on their head is falling out. I think it's really important and kind of significant to remember that the head on our hair is a little bit different. Or the hair on our head is a little different and treated a lot differently by the body. It seems that the head hair is a direct reflection of our internal health and how our body's doing and how our body's utilizing energy, because the hair follicles are very, very sensitive to energy and also stress and all of endotoxin and estrogen. And so it seems to me that specifically stress in the nervous system, which I don't think it's a coincidence that our hair is on our head and that's where our brain is and our nervous system is, concentrated. I don't think that that's a coincidence. I think there is a connection there, and that stress, whether it's, physical stress, mental stress, emotional stress, does cause hair loss or drives hair loss eventually. So I don't think that's a coincidence at all. What causes allergic reactions? I always got itchy from shellfish, but that stopped after fully nourished. My son has the same reaction. He is 2 and eats the same as me. What do you think? Yeah, so a lot of times it's high histamine, and histamine is really regulated mostly by copper. And so getting plenty of copper in the diet is important. I bet it's because you consume liver, or I'm assuming you do some type of liver. Does your son do liver? I'm curious about that. Copper really does help. And vitamin A specifically, which liver has both of those things, can help over time regulate our histamine levels because it's directly affecting our copper. So I'm curious if your son is following every single practice that you're following, or if there's certain things that he's maybe missing that you just might be overlooking that are important. They might seem like small things, but they could be very large. Thoughts on the Olipop soda brand? I think isn't that the one that has like the prebiotics in it? Oh my God. I saw it at a health, because I like to go to the health food store and see what's new. A lot of the stuff is I'm just like, I can't believe people are consuming this. But most of it's kind of fun. But I did see that, and I got the cherry vanilla. I think it's the Olipop. I'm gonna Google it right now just so I'm not just talking about something and looking like stupid. Yes, yeah, it's the Olipop. I got the cherry vanilla one. Oh my gosh, I felt like I was going to explode. And I was like, what is going on? And I realized it has all these prebiotic fibers, like Jerusalem artichoke and all these FODMAP, fructooligosaccharides prebiotic fibers. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is a hard pass. But it tasted really good. I'm not going to lie, but the amount of pain, I feel like I wanted to take something to my stomach and pop my stomach. I was so, I just felt like I was going to explode. So bloated. For women, what classifies as hirsutism? I'm not sure if this strip of hair along my lower abdomen is normal or not. Is there a spectrum in hirsutism? That's a really interesting question, because I think there are some women who are just like more genetically predisposed to hair growth in certain areas, or women who tend to be like hairier than others. Obviously, like, I feel like I'm pretty hairy for a woman, and I've always been that way. I feel like even like since I went through puberty, probably even before, but I'm light, like I'm Russian, so I have lighter hair, but it's still, and it's not as thick, but it's still like I have serious hair. But then I feel like some women like just have less hair. And then of course there are women who are more genetically predisposed to maybe darker, thicker hair. So I think it's like important to understand our genetics. Like if our mom and our grandma and our aunt and everyone is really, really hairy, then it's probably a good idea to assume like, okay, like I'm going to be on the hairier side. But if we have like weird abnormal hair growth that we maybe didn't have before, or has gotten worse, or is not normal for our genetics, like for me, I knew something was up when I started growing like dark, thick hairs on my mustache and like on my happy trail and on my nipples. You know what I mean? Like that was not normal for me. So, and especially because it was like some of it was very thick and coarse. Like, you know, you could pull it out, you'd pluck it, and like the root would be showing. So that was a way for me to know that that was abnormal. But for some of us, it's a little hard to pinpoint. But yeah, I wish there was kind of a range. I think we kind of have to use our intuition on that and kind of trust our gut. Do you think adding things in and having them not work are setbacks? Like if you have leaky gut, can't certain things, even in small quantities, irritate the already messed up gut lining? Well, if our lining's messed up, it's messed up. The thing about like leaky gut and all this like weird, I don't want to call it propaganda, but I just feel like a lot of these terms are marketing terms for you to therefore buy someone's product. You know, like you have leaky gut, and so therefore you need to do X, Y, Z. And most of it includes like their $500 system. So intestinal permeability is a real thing. However, asking why your intestines are permeable is way more important. No amount of food you remove or put back in is going to fix the intestinal permeability without fixing the metabolism. Because remember, the thyroid really heavily regulates how leaky the cells are, and then so does like our minerals like copper and magnesium. So a lot of people are just so hyper-focused on the food, they're forgetting that regardless of what food they're eating, like the intestinal permeability is there until they fix it. And it's not because of a food they're eating. Like, of course, irritating foods can make things worse, but, you know, while we have leaky gut, like there are going to be proteins that leak through into the bloodstream. Like it's just how it rolls. So we want to maybe try to lower the amount that happens, but it's going to happen until we fix the issue. And that's just going to take time. And so I don't really see the point in just consuming these really heavily restricted diets that are restricting the exact nutrients we need to fix our issues while we're trying to heal leaky gut. Like I just don't see, it just makes like, it's not like, it doesn't make any sense. It's like 2 + 1 = 5. Like it makes no sense. Are you familiar with pyroluria, or the thought that a lot of mental illness is caused by copper toxicity and zinc deficiency? I thought this was my problem, but now you've made me question it. Yeah, if you ever have thought that you are copper toxic, I highly recommend investing in Morley Robbins' like $99 RCP 101 class. It just will completely change your mind about everything. Most people do have like some copper dysregulation, but it has very little to do with our copper being toxic in the sense of like copper in it of itself is an important mineral, probably one of the most important minerals, but using it is a whole other issue. And we need very specific nutrients to use copper. And iron is the one thing that throws a wrench in the wheel and completely ruins our ability to utilize copper by robbing us of magnesium. You know, iron just burns through magnesium faster than we can intake it. And so really dealing with our copper issues comes down to dealing with iron issues and implementing those nutrients that are needed to move copper and use copper. So copper toxicity really is just copper dysregulation in the sense of like our body is not able to move it or use it because we're deficient in certain nutrients. I hope that makes sense. It's like a very simplified version, but I would question these ideas that we have a zinc deficiency and copper toxicity. These are things that are getting people into big trouble. Big trouble. Is pro-metabolic for everyone at every age? I think this, like, it's kind of getting weird. There's a reason why I'm like starting to say support your metabolism instead of going pro-metabolic. I feel like people are using pro-metabolic as like some type of diet. It's a really weird phenomenon that's starting to happen. So, is supporting your metabolism for everyone at every age? Yes, we want to support our metabolism. What that's going to look like for everyone is a little bit different. But yes, do we want to be getting high quality animal foods that contain a lot of nutrients and eating for digestibility? Yeah, I feel like everyone would really benefit from that. Yes, I do. Getting all the nutrients we need and all the energy we need. Yes, I feel like that is for everyone at every age. How we go about that is going to be a little different for everybody. Hi, Jess. I started taking vitamin E a few weeks ago and started breaking out like crazy. I stopped taking BC too many pimples, because too many pimples. Wondering if that's normal, and if I take it, it will go away eventually. I always when I talk about vitamin E, I talk about how like people are like, oh my gosh, my skin breaks out so bad. And I'm like, if you know, you know, because yes, it is a thing. A lot of people experience the vitamin E breakouts. I think it has a lot to do with iron, and then also just when we're mobilizing estrogen, vitamin E has like anti-iron effects. It has anti-estrogen effects. Like it really helps deal with lipid peroxidation, aka polyunsaturated fatty acids. So if we're already overloaded with these issues, it really, a lot of us like go way too hard too fast. Like people are like, oh, I take it every day all of a sudden. And I'm like, that's way too much. Sometimes we need to start with like a 1 capsule once a week or something like that. Or maybe opt for a more whole foods version like wheat germ oil or like a cold pressed wheat germ oil, or like maybe Purely E from North American Herb and Spice Co. Something that's a little bit more low-key whole foods version. But I think that if people are having a hard time with it, it's probably a good idea to go like very, very conservative at first, very small amounts, and see how we do, and then move up from there. I feel like grass-fed liver capsules are giving me a rash under my eyes. There are no other ingredients, maybe too much vitamin A for me. Yeah, it's a good idea to kind of figure out how much you need. But yeah, I do agree that people can do like just go too ham with supplements. And it's a good idea to kind of like take a step back and figure out how much we need. I stay away from iron fortified food, but I wonder if they had a place in diets because I know someone's 12-month-old baby is very low in iron and she kept baby away from the iron fortified food. What could happen? Babies are supposed to have low iron. That's how Mother Nature made it. That's why breast milk has something called lactoferrin in it that binds to iron. It protects the baby from pathogens. Pathogens feed on iron. And there's a reason why breast milk has no iron. There's a specific purpose for it. It's really interesting how, it's getting really bad out there. Really bad. How does the synthetic vitamin A and Accutane work to lower cystic acne? Pretty much it's really interesting because I think it has like a very antibacterial effect, but there's a reason why it doesn't work for everybody. But interestingly enough, when you look at the chemistry of it, it really displaces a lot of copper from the liver. It's really it's very harsh. It's a harsh medication, but I think it does have some like anti-iron effects, so it does like help chelate iron, but I need to review exactly why it's helping people with their acne, because a lot of people it doesn't help them, but there are people that it does. And I vaguely remember learning that has something to do with like how it's removing minerals in the liver. I need to review though. Is there a way to diminish the effects of added vitamin A and D? I love milk, but in my place, I only see the ones with added vitamins. Yeah, I think it's if we can't get access, it's better than nothing, right? And I think it's important to just remember that synthetic vitamin A and vitamin D does displace magnesium. And so we need to be particularly careful about our magnesium levels. But as long as we're aware of that, I think it's fine. Just being aware of it. 2 questions. Keratosis pilaris. How do you help this and why does it occur? Also, I know you've talked about cellulite. I'm not overweight, but gain weight in my stomach where I also get cellulite. A lot of times cellulite has to do with lymph flow. I think it has there's some estrogen connections, also possibly iron and polyunsaturated fats. Like what types of fats are in your cells? A lot of times our body likes to use saturated fats first and put polyunsaturated fats into the tissues. So are you eating lots of polyunsaturated fats like canola oil, soybean oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil? Are you doing lots of nut butters, maybe nuts and seeds? Those are all things that can, the body doesn't preferably like to use those fats. I do believe that vitamin E can help, but also really supporting lymph flow is very important. So like body brushing, trigger point therapy. Some people really like to use a fascia blaster. It is kind of expensive, but it works pretty well. Or even just foam rolling, like doing like something like the melt method or something like that, where you're working on your fascia, because the interstitial fluid, which is kind of like oftentimes what's showing up, why a lot of times cellulite is paired with a little bit of water retention. A lot of times it's because the fascia is unevenly hydrated. Fascia is like that web-like tissue that runs through our whole body. When you see like a piece of meat and it's like that white tissue, that's our fascia. We have similar fascia to animals, and that fascia is actually what the interstitial fluid travels through. And when our fascia is all bunched up or messed up from just improper movement or trauma, that can really store a lot of that fluid unevenly. So working on our fascia can be helpful. But yeah, if we gain weight in our stomach, that's often like cortisol, and we really want to focus on like blood sugar balancing and liver health, and obviously gut health. Keratosis pilaris is interesting because we've discussed it in the live before, and a lot of people have said like different issues for them cause their keratosis pilaris. I know some people have told me like just getting rid of nuts and seeds and polyunsaturated fats has like changed their keratosis pilaris. For me, it was really figuring out my gut inflammation. So like eating the raw carrot salad every day, getting beets in was very helpful, doing lots of saturated animal fats that are mostly raw if I can. I don't like stress about it, but implementing like, raw cream and raw milk really helped me. Coconut oil, butter, ghee, beef tallow, all those things were really helpful for my gut. And gelatin was amazing, and like bone broth and stuff like that. So that was like the first big steps. And then vitamin E was very helpful for me as well, just reducing my inflammation overall and continuing to work on my inflammation. Like I still have KP, but it's not close to as bad as it used to be. Like it used to be so bad, but I think like the inclusion of vitamin A rich foods has really helped me as well. I have talked about how I invest in those little like Korean spa exfoliators. You can find them on Amazon. They're like these little like weird red or green colored mitts, and you like soften your skin a little bit, take a bath or hot shower bath, like get your skin soft for about like 5 or 10 minutes. And then when you scrub those things, it takes off like this disgusting layer of your skin. And then for me, doing an aspirin spray, like just mixing aspirin powder with water on my KP topically, it's obviously just plain salicylic acid, really. But that paired with the exfoliation, like really makes a big difference in the appearance of my KP. What are all the big symptoms of H. pylori, and what would you do for it? They range. Like some people would say like the main one is often like heartburn, GERD, or burping like constantly. What's another one? Nausea can be one, just like regular indigestion, low stomach acid. And then sometimes it's like asymptomatic, but a lot of people report having heartburn or GERD when they have H. pylori. What I would do about it is I would really focus on lowering my stress first and foremost, because H. pylori usually takes up residence in the upper digestive tract and stomach because it can, and because our stomach acid is so low. And stomach acid is really there to protect us from pathogens, but when we're stressed out or we're really low in minerals like sodium and potassium, our stomach acid often gets very, very low, and then we're no longer protected, and these bacteria can kind of take up residence. So first I would just focus on my stress. In the meantime, I think that things like manuka honey and ginger can be very, very effective. Like even just doing like a grated ginger tea with manuka honey in there can be very effective. I think like monolaurin is pretty effective, as well as some people really like mastic gum. When I had an H. pylori infection, the mastic gum really didn't help me at all, but a lot of people report that it has made a big difference for their H. pylori. And then I really like the blend of by Biotics Research called FC Cytal, that's one of the supplements, and Dysbiocide. I think that blend, like those two supplements together, really take care of a lot of pathogens that are pretty, like if you just have like basic, maybe some dysbiosis, I think that those two paired together can be really help make a big difference for a lot of people. Hi, Jess. I believe I've achieved enough healing to begin some strength training. Do you have a go-to resource that I can check out to help me make a routine? Yeah, I personally have do Libby Westcombs. She has like a membership to her app, and her training programs are really awesome. I like hers, and then I'm eyeing Hannah Bauer's programs as well. She has like a really cool like functional core program. She has like a functional at home program. I really like her workouts. So those are kind of the two like fitness girls that I really, really look up to. Like I said, I personally do Libby Westcombs, but I was thinking about adding Hannah Bauer's like functional core system to what I'm already doing. But I know Hannah Bauer has like all types of routines. Why does fear around vitamin A accumulation sometimes surface in the repeat community? I feel like I'm forever behind on my vitamin A level. Yeah, it's really interesting. So there's this one guy, I forget his name. I think it's like Grant something, who thinks that vitamin A is a toxin. And so therefore, like, everyone's problem is vitamin A toxicity, and they need to eat a specific diet to make their bodies deficient in vitamin A. Now, from what I know about retinol and the fact that it turns into retinoic acid and it's responsible for gene expression, I think that that's a very dangerous stance that he has. I think he's just misled and confused on what the actual underlying issue is. And I personally think it's an iron issue and a copper dysregulation issue. And the fact that if we are consuming vitamin A, but we're not getting plenty of magnesium, and we're not getting plenty of sodium and potassium, if we're not getting plenty or a wide variety of other nutrients, there's going to be a problem. But I just don't get why milk would be so high in vitamin A. You know, it's like the first thing that babies are fed on, if vitamin A was a toxin. Yet, what's the one mineral that breast milk doesn't have? Iron. It's just really weird. So I think that's why there's a lot of fear surrounding vitamin A. I mean, obviously, we don't want to become vitamin A toxic. Like, of course, we don't want to overdo it on vitamin A. However, I think having like, you know, the equivalent of like 4 to 6 ounces of liver per week, and doing like high quality dairy in our diet we're probably going to be okay. I know you can't say dosages, but I'm just trying to get a sense of how much progesterone oil to take. It's ONA's 10% oil. Is there a common range and frequency that you see women doing well in? I mean, some women do anywhere from like 20 milligrams to 100 milligrams. I know for me, like 50 milligrams is kind of around my sweet spot. If I do too much more, I get kind of groggy. And I feel my blood sugar is dropping. Like I'm waking up too early, like 4 or 5 a.m. and I'm hungry. And so I know that it's like, that's a little bit too much for me. So when I do it, like I really experimented. I started with probably like just 1 or 2 drops, which I think each drop is like maybe 5 milligrams, and just went from there. But yeah, it's hard, especially if you're doing like the vitamin E oil. It's pretty thick and viscous. So it's hard to get a exact dosage. So I actually just go by like the size of the drop. I actually will drop it onto the back of my hand and lick it off, because it's easier for me to visually see a dose than to try to like be like, oh my gosh, that was like a big drop. This is a little drop. Like it's very thick. But yeah, I mean, I would start with the instructions. Download the instructions. You can go to Progest E. There's instructions on Progest E, some pretty in detail, like a PDF download that gives you a good summary of progesterone supplementation. Random, but did you notice much change to the texture and pattern of your natural hair after eating more saturated fats and cutting out polyunsaturated fats? Yeah, I personally found that my hair is much softer. It's not so dry as it was before. It's weird. My hair has changed so much. Like when I was younger, my hair was pin straight. Once I went through puberty, I did get a pretty good curl or natural wave. And then over the course of as my hormones have changed, it went from being extremely curly to and weird kind of I had much more ringlet type curls, whereas now I have more of a relaxed wave. It has definitely changed for sure. But as for the shininess and health, yes, I definitely noticed. And honestly, this is something weird that I observed. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but when I used to go out in the sun, this was years ago, I would it would almost smell like my hair was burning. When you go out in the sun for a long time, you go to the beach or to the lake or whatever, and you're out in the sun for, hours and hours and hours, and it would just smell like my hair was on fire. You know that smell that you get when you do too much heat tools? I would always smell that. And now it does not smell that way. So it makes me think that the polyunsaturated fats were actually causing further sun damage to my hair. Hello, Jessica. What are your thoughts on cod liver oil? Many thanks. I think that it can be a helpful tool, especially for people who can't get dairy, who maybe can't do liver. There are people that don't do liver very well. It can be a helpful tool to get vitamin A. I do think so. It needs to be high quality. Most cod liver oils are rancid. Honestly, the only brand that I know of that's pure and cold pressed and probably not rancid is Rosita's, which is fairly pricey. But I do think it can be, it's a good source of vitamin A and D. So it can be a helpful tool for, like I said, for people who can't do a lot of dairy, maybe have been vegan, vegetarian for a really long time and haven't been getting plenty of vitamin A, maybe can't do dairy yet and aren't really willing to do liver. Again, it can be a helpful tool in context. It's mostly monounsaturated fatty acids. It's not high in PUFAs, but I would still probably increase my vitamin E levels a little bit. But I highly recommend getting a vitamin A test. They aren't that expensive. You can get one through Request a Test or Life Extension if your doctor won't run one. But don't just go ham with vitamin A without just looking at your vitamin A levels. What are your thoughts on astaxanthin supplements? I read somewhere people taking it burn less in the sun. I feel like my skin bursts into flame with just an hour in the sun. I'm not a big fan of these random antioxidants. The true antioxidant is copper, and using copper better. So I think that getting plenty of saturated fats in the diet and vitamin A and magnesium is probably much more effective. But that's just my personal opinion. For people with severe period symptoms, what kind of tests do you suggest to find out exactly what's going on in the body? Well, first, I recommend just looking at your self-test, or not your self-test, but do some self-awareness and figure out how your body's maybe not being supported. So for women who are going long periods without eating, who are not getting plenty of protein, fat, and carbs from the right sources. They're eating way too many processed foods, way too many plant products, not enough animal foods. That's usually the place to start. If we're not giving our body what it needs, it's not going to do what we want it to do. Other things are foundational are sleep. Are we getting enough sleep? Are we getting enough sun? Are we getting enough carbs? Those are all really important. Are we just pushing our body into the ground, stressing about everything, not eating enough, drinking way too much coffee? Of course, our body's going to scream at us. The next step is we want to make sure we're ovulating. And this is why I have Mend Your Cycle, which is my little mini course, and even my free Temps and Pulse guide to kind of just get started with looking at how your body's doing and checking in with that. If you're looking for tests, I really think the Dutch test can be very helpful. I mean, it's going to tell you where your hormones are at, but remember that hormones are just a product of what our lifestyle is like and what our habits are like. So a lot of people are okay, I have these results, my hormones are super imbalanced, what do I do now? And it's like, you do the same thing that you were going to do, even if you didn't know those things. And it's balance your blood sugar, eat enough calories, make sure you're getting movement in every day, mindful movement, make sure you're making room for joy and fun, make sure that you are getting plenty of sleep and sun, and just taking care of yourself, like not putting so much pressure on yourself constantly to achieve and hustle and, be perfect. Like, I think that those are largely overlooked. But yeah, a Dutch test can be helpful for hormones. Full thyroid panel can be helpful for thyroid. Just what are you trying to find out? Like, are you trying to find out just where your levels are at, or are you actually trying to take action and help balance hormones? Those are the differences. What do you think about sea kelp supplements? Is there any brand type of sea kelp you prefer, would take? Thank you. I think that sea kelp, for the obviously most people are taking it for iodine, can be probably a helpful tool. But if you take iodine without doing anything that you should be doing, like getting your main minerals in, like magnesium, sodium, potassium, making sure your selenium levels are good, making sure your vitamin C levels are good, making sure your zinc levels are good, then you're going to screw yourself up. So it's really important to, when you're doing like those kind of obscure minerals like iodine, to first make sure you're just getting the basics in. But again, I think it can be a very helpful tool for people who need iodine, but you have to get the other minerals that are going to help you use iodine, or it's just going to make things worse. What would cause waking up with a sore throat, which goes away within 20 minutes? Are you mouth breathing at night? Like when you sleep, are you breathing properly through your nose and out your mouth, or are you sleeping with your mouth open all night? That would be a good thing, a good experiment. The best way we know is to tape our mouth shut. It's called mouth taping, and see if we are uncomfortable. A lot of people are like, oh my gosh, I can't breathe. And it's like, because you're not used to breathing through your nose. But yeah, I would look into that. Stretch marks from gaining weight, particularly around the butt thighs. I personally don't care how it looks, but do the stretch marks indicate a health issue if a weight gain is not a concern? Sometimes people, depending on the color of the stretch marks, I have heard that it can be like a fat-soluble vitamin deficiency or issue, vitamin A, vitamin E, which I find that beef tallow is probably the most effective thing for me, at least, to fade my stretch marks. I just found that was like no other, just putting that saturated fat all over it. It wasn't something that I was like intentionally trying to do, but I did have particularly very deep and purple stretch marks from when I went through puberty, and everyone was like, oh, they'll fade. And I was like, when? Because it's been a long time since puberty, and I'm still dealing with these purple stretch marks, and I didn't really care how they looked like you. Like, it's just kind of like, it was what I was used to. But I wanted to see, like, I'm always curious to see if things will fade things or how things help. And I did notice that as I really worked on getting my, eating more animal fats, eating more nutrients, they did fade. And then I have used like shea butter and cocoa butter and tallow on my skin for forever. And that has really changed my skin as well. Have you tried the Forever Healthy Hair Lip Plump? Yeah, I have. I like it. I think it's like a pretty good chapstick or like moisturizer for the lips. Would I say that it plumps my lips? Like, I don't know, but I do find that it like is very moisturizing at night. Like, I slather my face in the Lush and then I put the plump on, and it does feel very like, my face feels very luscious, I should say. What do you think causes non-alcoholic fatty liver disease? Too much iron and not enough copper in the liver. It's really interesting. Morley Robbins has a ton of studies on this. You can even type in like Morley Robbins fatty liver, and I'm sure he has like a few articles written on it. What could red dots signify on the skin? I think they're called petechiae, kind of like small tiny dot that's obviously blood. Notice them popping up here and there as a broken capillary. Interesting, because some people call them, I think, cherry angiomas. Actually, let's see if you can see one. I have one right here that I got when I was doing tons of high intensity interval training and probably way under eating and not taking care of myself. But it just like bursted. Like I was working out one day, my face was super red and like hot, and then all of a sudden as my face calmed down, I realized like, wow, I had popped a blood vessel. But some people, there's also things called cherry angiomas, which I think are actually probably related. But I remember Lauren at Innate Functional Nutrition talking about cherry angiomas and saying that it probably has to do with estrogen. Obviously, estrogen does affect blood flow. I know that for me, like I used to get like little bursted blood vessels all over like my chest, and obviously I got one here. And I had some cherry angiomas like on my back. And I wondered if it was from like polyunsaturated fats and estrogen. But over time, like I don't get as much. I now that I think about it, like they really haven't popped up for me, but the ones that I do have haven't gone away. But this one's particularly large. And so I need to go to like I don't know, plastic surgeon or something and see if they can like inject saline into it to kind of get it to go away. I haven't done that yet. But yeah, I haven't been able to find why. I've been able to see like serotonin and estrogen, all those things affect blood flow and capillaries and things like that. So I'm assuming it's something like that, but I haven't been able to find like a definitive answer. Hi, Jess. I have a family member who's over 400 pounds and just suffered her second heart attack in her 50s pre-menopause. Oh, I'm sorry. That sucks. I just lost your second message. I saw that you had sent a second one. Hold on. What is the best first steps I can advise her in terms of dieting and lifestyle to help her start her metabolism healing journey? Thank you. I think like first steps is always the same when it comes to metabolism is get those dumb polyunsaturated fats out of the diet. Like just stop eating crap and start eating whole foods, not obsessing too much about which whole foods, just eating whole foods. But it's important, like as a coach, you know, I've worked with a lot of people and you kind of have to take people from where they're at. You see where people are at and give them action steps that are going to be the most effective for them. So for example, if someone's eating McDonald's every day, probably the best thing to do is give them a different breakfast to start eating that's easy enough so that they don't eat McDonald's every day and not say like, oh, you need to take this and you need to do this and you need to do this and all these different things. It's like you got to kind of meet people where they're at and give them realistic changes. So I don't know anything about that lady, but I would say that giving her maybe some simple action steps that are not going to be too difficult, that's what I would start with, and kind of seeing what her daily habits are and making changes to that. Any tips for extremely dry eyes? I follow most of the fundamentals, eat adequate liver, etc. Maybe I would be looking at something possibly missing. Like, did the dry eyes just happen all of a sudden, or have they always been an issue? And then what changed when, like, if they weren't always an issue, what changed from when they weren't an issue to when they did become an issue? You know, lubrication is often fats. And so making sure we're getting plenty of fats, like some people need more fats than others. You know, if you're getting liver, you're probably getting a lot of vitamin A, but making sure that you are possibly getting vitamin A from other sources. So yeah, I'd be looking at a few different factors. But usually when it comes to a specific issue, it's always what happened, you know, when did it start and what was I doing before that? Is it something that I changed that brought it on? Or, you know, was there something that I removed that actually was helping my eyes? Coffee in the luteal phase or no? As long as it's consumed after a super nutrient-dense meal that contains enough protein, carbs, and fat, is not drunk on an empty stomach, and contains adequate protein, carbs, and fat in it. How do you use your own as progesterone oil, and have you had any negative effects from it? No, I mean, if I take too much, it makes me kind of like lethargic, so I don't take too much anymore. Sometimes you gotta have to experiment, but no, I haven't noticed any negative effects from it. Like I said before, I just drop it onto my hand and lick it off, and then kind of like rub it into my gums with my tongue. Could systemic enzymes like dissolvitol be dangerous, and could you please repeat the brands you recommend and said you tried? Yeah, systemic enzymes can thin the blood, so it's important to be careful with them, especially if you're doing other blood thinners, like vitamin E is a blood thinner, aspirin's a blood thinner, all those, you know, make sure if you're on medications, like you should be very careful. Yeah, and the ones that I've used are Doctor's Best. I've used those for a long time. Is there a good ratio of protein, carbs, and fats we should be eating in a day? You kind of have to figure out what works well for you, but I don't think any woman really should be eating beneath 2,000 calories. Obviously, if we're already eating that little, it's probably a good idea to slowly move up our calories over time. But usually that's going to balance out to about like 25% of our protein, and I don't want to give exact numbers. This is why I don't give exact numbers, because everyone's so different. But I think anywhere from like 20 to 25% of our protein, or calories should come from protein. Anywhere from like 30 to 50% can come from fat, and 30 to 50% from high quality carbohydrates. But again, that takes some experimentation and figuring out what works really well for us. Thoughts on Vitex or chaste berry? Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big fan of it. I don't think it works very well, and I think for a lot of people it just messes their hormones up. But some women have said it's very effective for them. So I just personally haven't seen it be very helpful. And then, I work a lot with women who have polycystic ovarian syndrome, and they tend to already have really high luteinizing hormone. And so Vitex increases luteinizing hormone. And so there's no reason to take it if we already have high luteinizing hormone. But if you aren't ovulating and it helps you ovulate, then of course it's going to help raise progesterone. So I get raw liver and chase it with lots of OJ. I don't think my stomach would be really happy having coffee after that. Should I still give it a try to prevent iron absorption? I honestly wouldn't stress too much about it. But yeah, I mean, everyone does their stuff a little bit differently. If somebody is having a hard time digesting dairy foods, such as cow's milk, would it be a good idea to implement other dairy products like butter, heavy cream, and Parmesan into the diet? Yeah, I think that milk sometimes is the hardest for people to digest just because it's often high volume. And so things like cream and butter and Parmesan still help you get in the calcium and the vitamin K and a little bit of vitamin D without having to digest like the large amount of lactose, because a lot of people have a hard time with the lactose. And sometimes people are having a hard time with the casein. So it's just, everyone's a little different. Like, I personally don't do well on high volume amounts of milk. I know there are people in the pro-metabolic community that like to drink tons of milk. I've never been one of them. I don't chug a big quart of milk ever. It just makes me feel awful. I like to chew my food and like digest my food. Do I throw some milk into a latte? Yeah. Do I drink like a small glass of milk when I'm having B vitamin cookie? Yeah. Do I have a smoothie sometimes with milk in it? Hell yeah. But I don't like chug milk all the time. I do a lot of dairy products, things like yogurt and cottage cheese and butter, tons of butter and cream. And that's good enough for me. Surprisingly, I don't do well on a high amount of dairy. I like to implement dairy into my diet, but I actually do better on like a higher meat, root, and fruit diet. Do we need to make sure we are hitting a certain amount of copper in a day's time? That's not something I would stress about. We just want to include foods that contain a lot of copper. I would be more concerned with getting plenty of vitamin C in my diet from whole food sources, not ascorbic acid, whole foods vitamin C. And then getting plenty of like our fat soluble vitamins. As long as we're doing like liver and oysters and meat, there's usually plenty of copper in our diet. Any skincare brand recommendations for cystic acne? I've heard good things about Curology, but since it's mainstream, I'm skeptical. I mean, most of acne is not topical. I really highly recommend Healthy Skin Glows. She helps you figure out like a good acne regimen that's very, I guess, respectful of the skin barrier. A lot of products do not respect the skin barrier, and it's very problematic. So yeah, Sarah at Healthy Skin Glows is really like the skincare whiz, and she really understands the chemistry of the skin. But a lot of times acne has a lot to do with what's going on internally. So, if what we're doing externally is not working at all, there's usually an internal driver. Do you use self-tanner? Any brand recommendations? I think self-tanner is actually pretty dangerous. The way that it actually tans your skin is by causing oxidation. And so it increases your need for things like vitamin E. That's why your skin smells almost burnt. It's like the same thing that's happening when you like burn a piece of toast or, burn sugar or those types of things. Like that's how it's tanning us. So it's not a great practice. I use it occasionally for sure. It's nice to have kind of that like tan, but I wouldn't use it regularly at all. Hi, Jess. I recently heard a gut approach to work on parasites first, since their death releases bacteria, then candida. How important do you think this is in the order which things are done? Yeah, so some people have like a big to small approach, which is parasites, bacteria, fungus. Some people have a small to big approach, like fungus, bacteria, and parasites. Some people believe that the parasites hide behind the biofilms of like fungus and bacteria, and so they're really protected. What I have found a lot of times is when people have really severe gut issues, the parasites are hidden behind the biofilms. A lot of people that have parasites, they'll sometimes show up on a gut test, but sometimes it actually takes a few rounds of working on fungus and bacteria before a parasite even shows up, which makes me think that they're hiding behind the biofilms of fungus and bacteria. But if you have a clear parasite, it's probably a good idea to try to get rid of it. However, if it's not budging, it's not moving, then there's probably other pathogens that's hiding behind. So that's kind of my mindset, is I don't think it's an either or situation. If there is a clear parasite and it's easy to eradicate, I think why the heck not? It does tend to cause a lot of stress on the body. But if you're just trying to eradicate the parasite over and over and over again, and it's not eradicating, then it's probably because the parasite's using the other pathogens. I hope that makes sense. I don't obsess about order as much as like working on the thing that helps the person the most. Some people like have a lot of fungus, but the bacteria is causing them more issues. And so working on the bacteria is actually making them feel better, if that makes sense. And then there are some like antibacterial herb blends that work on both bacteria and parasites. So it's like one of those things where it's like, well, you're technically working on both anyways. Best ways to raise stomach acid without baiting HCl: getting plenty of potassium and sodium in, like the adrenal cocktail, once or twice a day. Sometimes people like to use celery juice. Same thing. It just has a lot of sodium and potassium in it. But it's usually minerals, because minerals are what make up stomach acid. Also, not being stressed before meals. A lot of people are eating on the go, they're just eating when they shouldn't be eating. Like sit down, eat a meal really quick, or I shouldn't say really quick, but like make some time to eat a meal and then go back to your work or go back to what you're doing. Like don't be scrolling on your phone or on your computer or working while you're eating for the most part. And then like diluted apple cider vinegar can be really helpful, and so can digestive bitters. So those are kind of my favorite non-HCl approaches. But stomach acid is almost always low because of stress. And so if you try to like artificially get it up and it continues to be low, it's not because you are like deficient in stomach acid, it's because there's something lowering your stomach acid. After I got the flu recently, I broke out with psoriasis all over my body. I think it took a toll on my body and nutrient stores. How can I help my body? Sometimes like I think that for me, like getting sick oftentimes shifts my gut microbiota a lot, which is why I do activated charcoal while I'm sick. I do like my raw carrot salad. I just focus on the gut. But that's not unheard of. Like I've heard of people saying that it kind of like has disrupted their gut and their liver. And I would also be looking at like, did you take anything for it? Because like things like Tylenol or Advil, things like that actually do really stress out the liver. And so that can sometimes affect detoxification and gut health as well. But I would just be focusing on the basics, like just supporting my body, lots of easy to digest, roots and fruits for carbs, broths, and well-cooked meats. I think like meats, broths, soups, things like that. Well-cooked meats tend to be much easier digested. Getting plenty of sleep, like those are the types of things that I think really support the body. What happens to raw honey when you put it into hot liquid? A lot of people say that it's not good for the honey because it kills the enzymes. I personally don't really stress too much about it, but if like, I'm not going to put the honey in my tea and then pour the boiling water over it. Like I'm going to wait a little bit to put the honey in, if that makes sense. Some people say it makes the honey toxic. I don't like to use fear-mongering language. Unless someone can prove it to me, I don't want to hear it. But I think it's a good idea if you're trying to get the benefits of the enzymes to like not, pour boiling water over it. My chiropractor recently suggested I look into taking papaya enzymes to help absorb and break down more of the nutrients from meat. Do you have a good recommendation? Thank you. Most papaya or like bromelain enzymes that I found, or papaya has an enzyme in it called papain, have really horrible additives in it. I've never been able to find a papain or papaya enzyme that doesn't have like maltodextrin and a bunch of other additives in it. So tell me if you find one, but I've not been able to find one. I read that sprouted nuts are easier to digest and have less anti-nutrients. Do you know if they also have less PUFA? No, nothing's going to change the fat content of a food. But if you like nuts and you do okay with a few sprouted nuts, honestly, I wouldn't stress about it. A lot of people get just so stuck in these black and white ideas of food. And I'm like, if you like to eat nuts, like don't restrict nuts because then you're going to end up binging on nuts. Like just have a few dang nuts. Like they have nutrients in them. I just wouldn't overdo it. Like they're not going to be a diet staple. They're not, a protein, but they can provide, sustenance and value to the diet. They're just not like, you can't change the fat content of nuts. They're going to be polyunsaturated, but there are certain nuts that are grown in more tropical places that have less polyunsaturated fats. Things like macadamia nuts, for example, are mostly monounsaturated. So, thinking of things that way is probably a good idea. Could you explain how low thyroid metabolism could sometimes result in being thin and having a hard time gaining weight? The opposite makes more sense to me. Would just like to understand it more. Yeah, the body's just not. Remember that thyroid issues are just a really misplaced or inability to regulate energy. So energy can go both ways. It can be a wasting of energy. Think about it. If you're not using energy well and you're just wasting energy, think about maybe a toddler trying to pour water from one glass to another. And they're like, ooh, and only half of the glass of water is getting into the other glass of water. You can think of all the lost water as all of lost energy. It's the body not using energy well. Now, the opposite could be happening, and the toddler's putting multiple glasses of water on the shelf to save it for later. But the other can be happening as well. It's just an imbalance and a poor regulation of energy. That was a horrible way to explain it, but I'm just trying to get it across that it's just the body's not using energy well. And that could mean storing it for later or just wasting tons of it. Do you know if using an Apple Watch is an accurate way to measure pulses? I'm not honestly that sure, but I guess using the pulse at your wrist is probably fairly effective. I'm in my 3rd trimester and have been taking Midolife Oyster pills. The serving is 4. How many or how often would you take them? I can't give a recommendation, but honestly, I would probably take 2, maybe every other day or something like that. I don't know. I'd be just looking at what is this an equivalent of, and then how many oysters would I eat a week? I think that's a better way to look at stuff is what is this supplement the equivalent of? Okay, so 1 pill is equal to 1 oyster. Okay, perfect. I'm going to have, 1 per day. That's how I would figure it out more than anything else. And I know all oyster supplements are different. What can cause dizziness? A lot of things. Blood pressure issues, low blood sugar, all types of issues. Yeah. What are your thoughts on going pro-metabolic for people with family history of diabetes? Well, if I had a family history of diabetes, which I do, I would be avoiding iron at all costs, and I would be really avoiding polyunsaturated fats at all costs. A lot of people think pro-metabolic is just pounding carbohydrates, which I just don't get. It's no, it's balancing your protein, carbs, and fats and getting protein from the right sources, fats from the right sources, and carbs from the right sources, and figuring out what the right sources are for you. That's literally what being pro-metabolic is. I don't know where the miscommunication is happening. Best time of day to apply progesterone. I personally only do it at night. It makes me so sleepy. I'm dying at your Olipop story. Yeah. I literally thinking of the bloat that I experienced is still making me cringe. When adding progesterone drops to your skincare, do you literally just mix the drops with a skin oil or lotion? Also, do the drops count towards your daily progesterone drops? How much for skin? No, I don't count them towards my daily progesterone drops. And literally, like, let me just reenact what I do. Skin oil. Get all the skin oil I want. Progesterone. 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 today. Rub it on my face. That's what I do. I don't overthink things, guys. I really try to simplify my life. And I don't really stress about the small stuff. And the reason why like, you guys think I have so much knowledge is just because I'm not afraid to experiment with things. Yeah, some things have gone really wrong, but I'm careful about certain things that I do. Obviously, if I know that it's going to be like life-threatening, I don't do it. But most things, like, I've lived through. Hey, Jess, do you know if desiccated oyster pills have norovirus or foodborne illness risk? Thanks. I'm honestly not sure. That pretty much goes with any food ever that we could ever eat, I'm sure. I asked about allergic reactions. You asked if my son eats liver. Spot on. That's the one thing that he doesn't do lately. I'll get him back on liverwurst. Yeah, it's probably the copper. I've been taking beef liver pills for 2 months while eating a lot of animal products, and I've been feeling lightheaded, and I'm worried I have vitamin A toxicity. Can this happen with the beef liver? Well, how much are you eating? And what other vitamin A sources are you consuming? Some people do decide to scale back on their liver. But, you know, I would be very surprised if you had vitamin A toxicity from liver. I think that they give you like a specific serving size for a reason. That's why I follow the specific serving size on the bottles that I purchase. You know, every brand has a different serving size. But yeah, if you're worried about something, obviously stop it and get that checked out. You can always get your vitamin A levels tested. With acid reflux, where should I start? I would just start with figuring out what's the pattern. You know, when we have acid reflux, like, when is it happening? After what foods? Is it at a certain time of our cycle? Is it at a certain time of the day? I just start looking at patterns of what's going on. If it's after every meal, oftentimes it's an indigestion issue. So we would want to start to focus on working on digestion. So really, like, when we're trying to figure out how to fix an issue, we first have to figure out what the commonality or what's driving the issue, or it's kind of hard to figure it out. But yeah, I would start just tracking my patterns first. Is white on the back of the tongue if scrapable bacterial overgrowth? Everyone is a little different. There should be like a small or like a thin film. It's not like, it shouldn't be like super white, but a thin film on the tongue. But if it's very thick, or it just never goes away, or your breath smells really bad, oftentimes I can point to like fungal issues or things like that. Is palm oil okay? I don't personally use it when cooking, but I love this Latino plantain chips that are made with it and craving it so bad. I'm pregnant. Yeah, I personally don't stress too much about palm oil. It does have more saturated fats in it than most vegetable oils, but I wouldn't go overboard on it either. You know what I mean? I experienced severe insomnia for 6 months. After reducing stress significantly and gaining some weight, I've got it under control. I still take 1 milligram of melatonin each night. Is this amount bad? Well, melatonin kind of shuts down the thyroid. It's a hormone of winter and hormone of darkness. Like, I personally screwed myself up taking melatonin. But so I definitely, I'm not a big fan anymore. But I know some people still use it. I just think it's very difficult to get my temps up, or people and clients that I've worked with temps up while they take it. Do you know anything about letrozole Femara to boost ovulation? I've had multiple clients that have used it. Obviously, I'm not a doctor, so that's not like my thing whatsoever. I'm just there to support them like nutritionally. But some observations that I've made, like I remember a client who experienced like severe pain afterwards. Like, I've seen like some weird stuff happen afterwards. But that's just from my observations. But yeah, I'm not, like, medications are not in my scope. Feeling so much better since fully nourished. However, I feel like 8 to 9 hours of sleep isn't enough. I also wake up with a white tongue most of the time. Could fungal overgrowth cause someone to need more sleep? It could. Also, like if our adrenals, if we need a little bit more adrenal support, I know for me, like when my adrenals are shot, I wake up and it's like so hard to wake up in the morning. It takes me like almost like a few hours to wake up in the morning. So that's something that I've experienced. But yeah, if we have gut issues, it can definitely cause us to have some rough sleep at night. The best way, if you can, if you have the ability to get some type of sleep tracker, like an Oura ring or some type of like activity tracker to track how you're sleeping. I know an Oura ring is probably the best. That can be helpful in kind of seeing like how you're sleeping and are you getting deep restful sleep all night long. Do you have a shower filter? Which one does any of those $25 to $30 ones work from Amazon work? I have one called Aquasana and I think it's like $50. Does it work? I don't know. I mean, they say it works. It's like a charcoal filter. If I had a hard time digesting Great Lakes hydrolyzed collagen, would bone broth protein or beef protein isolate be better? Looking to increase my protein intake. Yeah, I would opt for gelatin or straight bone broth because like nothing's going to take the place of the gelatinous foods, the glycine-rich gelatinous foods. Bone broth protein, I don't like it because it doesn't have a lot of isoleucine in it, which is a very important protein for detoxifying estrogen. So for protein, I prefer a beef protein or a whey protein or a casein protein, whatever you can tolerate better. But those don't count as the beneficial effects that we get from gelatin. Gelatin helps balance out muscle meats. I've been slowly adding gluten wheat back and notice inner ear canal itchiness. I wonder if it's inflammation, and do you have any advice? If you don't do well with gluten, don't eat gluten. Like I've been very clear with people that I personally do not eat gluten, do not do well with gluten. You can never force me to eat gluten. I do have sourdough occasionally, once in a while, if that's all I have access to, but I will never eat fortified iron, like wheat products ever. Like I'll never eat a fortified wheat product. I'd rather die. It just is the most painful thing to eat. But there are a lot of people that don't have any problems with wheat and cut it out because someone told them to. And that's the point I try to make is if you can tolerate sourdough, why cut it out? There's literally no reason to. But if it causes you inflammation and irritation, don't eat it. I'm interested in the North American herb and spice oregano mouthwash. Do you think it's a good or a bad idea? Bad in the sense that it could wipe out too much bad bacteria. I know that the mouthwash, I think the instructions say to swallow it. I personally wouldn't swallow it afterwards because I think it has lavender oil in it. But I don't know. I've tried it before. I don't find it that great. I prefer Risewell. I love Risewell's teeth products. I don't know why I love them so much. They're just like, they taste good and they also work so well. This doesn't happen every time I eat, but sometimes I'll get a headache right after I eat. I read that it might be a blood sugar issue. I was wondering what your thoughts are on this. Yeah, I mean, what are you eating? What foods are you getting a headache after? Like, that's what I would do. When we get an issue, I'm going to keep reiterating this point for you guys. If you get an issue, pinpoint when the issue is starting, what's happening, what's the pattern, because we cannot fix an issue until we figure out what's driving the issue. If we're only getting a headache after certain meals, what meals? What are we eating? Is it an irritating food? Is it too much sugar and not enough protein? Is it a specific type of food? Those are the things that I would be paying attention to. You changed your red light therapy lamp to a red heating bulb lamp. Sorry if I'm calling it wrong. Do you like it better? Do you still like the old one? I use both. Like this one is not the heating one. It's just the one that doesn't heat because I can't be under the heat one when I'm talking to you guys. I get like way too fired up and too warm. So I think that they come in handy, but I like the red or the heat lamp before bed because it like is very warming and relaxing. So I like both. I use both. Is bad circulation always due to poor metabolism? Probably. What is your opinion on monk fruit sweetener? Why? I don't get why someone would consume it. I don't get it. If you need a sweetener, your body's craving sugar. Why in the heck would we give it something fake? I just will never understand things like monk fruit. Does adding casein to ice cream change the taste texture? Yeah, it definitely has like a very pasty almost texture. Like I don't really love the texture of casein. I find it only like works well in like a milkshake or like brownies, like a baking recipe. I actually like the texture of it like mixed into ice cream. I make like kind of a milkshakey, like creamy type, I guess like almost like it's like almost like a thick milkshake. I mix a little milk, some casein, and some ice cream. And I like the texture of that, but for the most part, I don't really like casein's texture. Struggling to sleep due to night sweats, super pregnant. Would this be due to estrogen? Possibly, or low blood sugar. Most pregnant women are just not eating enough and not getting enough minerals like sodium, potassium, magnesium. I would be really ensuring that I'm getting enough calories throughout the day. Does it matter where you apply progesterone? What area do you find best for absorption? I just apply it where it says to apply it, which is in the gums, but it depends on what one you're using. Some people like it on the skin. I do find that if I apply it on the skin, it's a more subtle, like I get a more subtle reaction. I don't get that immediately calm feeling. But yeah, I usually just do it like I always say, guys, I put the drops on my hand, I lick it off, and then I rub my tongue into my gums. Do you think it's okay to use a moisturizer with olive oil or another MUFA? I definitely avoid PUFAs. I think whatever works well for you. Like, you know, I don't have any like opinions over what you guys use in your skincare. I just personally share that I don't use a lot of plant fats, but I definitely think MUFAs have their place. Why would cervical mucus shift from extremely egg white approaching ovulation to very watery in consistency during the same time? Started vitamin E from Blackburn about 4 weeks ago. Maybe that's just your pattern. I mean, everyone's cervical mucus pattern is a little bit different. Hi, Jess. What do you recommend to help chronic stress, referring to the nervous system and mental stress? Thank you. So first of all, getting to the bottom of what stressors we have control over and getting rid of them. I think a lot of people take on way too much stress that they don't have to. It's because they put unrealistic expectations on themselves or they're trying to please other people. Those two things just will literally kill us. So first of all, saying no to everything that's a no. Like if your automatic reaction to someone asking you something or wanting to do something is you don't want to do it, don't do it. Like, I'm just going to let you in on a secret to life. And then for the things that we maybe can't control and we have to do, or things that are just, you know, our life is stressful and they're there, making our body more resilient to stress by supporting our body, eating every 3 to 4 hours, eating nutrient-dense foods, making sure we're getting plenty of minerals like sodium, potassium, magnesium, not skimping on carbs, not skimping on sleep in exchange for exercise, which a lot of people do. Once we're there, then we can start to say, okay, I'm still really stressed out. What can I add in? And at that point, like adaptogens can be helpful. Things like L-theanine or ashwagandha, things like that can be helpful. But first of all, if our nervous system is constantly stressed out, we got to get as much stress out of our life as possible. And we may need to even talk to a mental health professional to help us work through either trauma or just work through communication and saying no and trying not to please as many people. You know what I mean? Because I think sometimes that's what we're doing. I live in New Zealand where our soil is very low in iodine and it is recommended to consume iodine-enriched sea salt. Would you recommend this? I probably would get iodine from other sources, but I think the same is recommended in the US. When I buy sea salt, it says like, just FYI. It doesn't say that exactly, but it's like, this is not iodized, you know? They like want to remind you to make sure, you know, like you're not buying iodized sea salt. But yeah, I get iodine from other sources personally. Also, do you think caffeine or anything should be avoided when DHEA is high? If you feel worse with caffeine, then yeah, of course. But high DHEA is usually due to way more stress than just the stress of caffeine. However, remember, how we consume caffeine is everything. If we are drinking coffee on an empty stomach, we're doing it wrong. We need to make sure we are fully nourished with a protein, carb, and fat breakfast before we consume coffee. And that coffee should have sugar. It should have sugar, carbs, protein, and fat in it at all times. Laser worked well for me with the broken blood vessel on my face. It was right under my left eye on my cheekbone. Looked like I was hit with a BB, and now it's gone. Thank you, Randy. It's weird because mine is under my left eye, right on my cheekbone too. That's so weird. Okay, that's really helpful. How do you take oregano oil if you eat raw oysters? What's your favorite way to eat oysters? I just take oregano oil by like putting a few drops under my tongue. Like that's how I take it. And I don't like take it any specific time of day. Oftentimes I just take supplements when I remember, which is usually like after breakfast. And then with raw oysters, what's my favorite way to eat them? Just get them, steam them enough to be able to pop them open, pry them open, putting a little, you can put like a butter knife or an oyster spoon if you have one, just to disconnect the muscle from the bottom. And then I just do like a spritz of lemon juice, and I like hot sauce on mine, either like Tabasco or Tapatio or some type of hot sauce, whatever you like. And that's how I do it, and then slurp them down. I personally don't really love raw oysters or slimy little creatures, but I do it for the minerals. Have you tried vitamin K2 with menaquinone by Doctor's Best? Would this one be okay to take? Thank you. I've never tried it, and I have never looked at the label, so I couldn't tell you yes or no. Hi, Jess. Just wanted to tell you that I've been implementing info learned from you and Noelle for the past 3 months, and I'm currently having my first ever low pain cycle. Thank you so much. That's so awesome. Yay. Remember, guys, it just takes time, usually 90 to 100 days. There's a reason why I say that amount of time. It's not like I'm just randomly making up that number. It takes 100 days for a dormant ovary in your follicle or your ovary to make it to ovulation. So, you know, when we ovulate, we're ovulating with the follicle or the egg that was, you know, started its journey 100 days ago. And that's just important to remember, because I think some of us want our fixes to be instant. But that is awesome. Thanks for doing this, Joss. This is super kind of you, and I'm sure very helpful for everyone. Of course, I'm thankful that you guys can be here on Wednesday nights. If I have had a slight shellfish reaction for over 20 years ago, can I still try oysters? If no, can I supplement? Really want to get some oysters in. Can you? That would be my question. I don't know. You know, everyone's a little different with how experimental they are. Like I'm a little bit crazy. And so, you know, a lot of people are not as adventurous or experimental as me. And I totally understand that. I would probably be on the careful side. Like I would probably test it on my hand first. I don't know what your reaction, like the extent of your reaction is, but I would be very careful. I hate liver so much. Is beef tongue a good organ meat? What's your favorite way to make organ meats? I think a mixture of organ meats is probably a good idea. Liver, I personally don't like to eat it as like a meal. I can tolerate pate, and so I usually will just make pate and like do it on a piece of bread or crackers. Or I usually will blend it into my meat and make meatballs. So that's the majority of the time I'm buying it ground into ground beef, and that's how I consume it for the most part. Or I just take it raw. I literally cut it into chunks and swallow a little bit every day. That's how I go about it. Hey, I'm 14. I'm new to metabolic healing. I'm so excited. That's so awesome. I wish I was so cared about my health when I was 14. Hello, is there anything from what you teach most about pro-metabolic eating that you wouldn't suggest for women in their 2-week wait and through pregnancy? Hello, is there anything from what you teach most about pro-metabolic eating that you wouldn't suggest for women in their 2-week wait and through pregnancy? Not really. I would just, you know, wouldn't do any like harsh detoxing, which most things are not harsh detoxes. But yeah, no. Why would an anti-inflammatory diet help period symptoms? I've experimented with it in my luteal phase and would cut out most animal foods plus caffeine, grains, and would eat lots of veg, fruits, nuts, also fish, and would seed cycle. I have some of the best periods of my life. Could you explain why this could be? A lot of those foods are immunosuppressive. So if our immune system and our gut is irritated, a lot of times those foods will help us feel better for a period of time. I've experienced that. A lot of people have experienced that. But I think it's best to eat however we feel our best with, but we need to look at our overall health, not just our period, but also how we're doing day in and out. How is our energy? How is our mood? How are our temps and pulses? How's our blood sugar? You know, our period is one marker. It's a very important marker, but it's not the only marker. And a lot of times it's a sign of something, some bigger issue, especially if we're experiencing other symptoms throughout the cycle. Does it work? I don't know. They say it works. But yeah, I mean, sometimes I'm not going to promise you guys like, oh yeah, it totally works when I don't, you know, from what I've read, I think people are saying it works, you know, but I'm not going to just like say like, yes, of course. Finding unfortified wheat has been really hard where I live, but recently found one whole wheat flour that doesn't say is fortified. Literally the rest say fortified. Would the whole wheat be good? Yeah, I would get whatever is fortified, or I would avoid. Iron fortified food is just so hard on the body and the metabolism, which is why a lot of people experience, you know, look at all the places where iron fortification exists. All those places have horrible gluten issues. Why do people feel so much better when they stop the fortified wheat products and start eating gluten-free products? Is it because they're gluten-free, or is it because they're iron-free? I always wonder that, and I think it's the iron-free is actually the reason why people feel better. Thanks so much for this. Do you think you can heal metabolism with only foods, or do you think added supplements are necessary for most people, like vitamin E, magnesium, beef liver pills, etc.? I think nutrition should be the first focus, and I honestly think it should be that way for like 30 to 60, even 90 days. If you're at like the 90-day mark and you're really still needing help, I think supplements can be supportive. I look at supplements more as tools than as necessities. But I stay away from people. Like, I think there's a lot of people in this community that are just getting really dogmatic and just really like, if you don't do this, like you're gonna, like this is going to happen, or like you need to do this, or like if you don't do this, you might as well just be an idiot, you know? And I just think that that mindset is really scary, especially for those of us who maybe like don't have the money to spend on supplements, or maybe we just don't feel comfortable taking supplements. So I just want to remind everyone that you can do a lot of healing with just nourishing foods, with nutrient-dense foods. We can get most of the nutrients we need from nutrient-dense foods. Supplements can be helpful tools, especially if we're in a really imbalanced place. Like if we're in a place where we're having a really hard time getting out of it, that's where supplements come in handy. But I would be focusing on nutrition, sleep, sunlight, enjoyment and relaxation and fun way before I'm like focusing on just having a supplement stack. What are natural ways to raise estrogen? Well, we first need to figure out if we really need to raise estrogen, or if our estrogen is just stuck in our tissues. A lot of people who have low estrogen just aren't moving estrogen because it's stuck. And because if we're ovulating, if we're having a cycle, oftentimes there is estrogen. It's just where to go, because the blood is just a highway for hormones. But we really want to be focusing on our cycle. And a lot of people who have low estrogen or low hormones are either not ovulating or not ovulating well, or not eating enough and are overstressed. And so those are kind of the places we want to start, is eating enough calories, balancing our blood sugar, prioritizing sleep, not exercising too hard, getting those nutrient-dense foods in, making sure we're ovulating. And a lot of times, if we give that like 90 to 100 days, you know, of consistency, we'll really start to feel better. But that's kind of where I would start personally. Thank you so much, Jess. Wednesday nights with you are my me time. Nobody bugs me because they all know I'm busy with you, and the rest who post cues with me, even my mom knows and doesn't even call or text. You guys are so cute. I know you guys are really consistent about being here. And if you notice, like sometimes I always announce the live the day before, but sometimes I don't like announce it because I want to keep it a little bit smaller. And then sometimes I'll send a reminder to keep, you know, and it will be bigger. But I like to be able to get through all of your guys' questions without like rushing. But yeah, I'll do a last call for questions right now. We'll stick around for like 10-ish more minutes if there's enough questions for that. But I'll get to all of your guys' questions, or if you have one on your mind, ask it, because we're going to be done in a few minutes. What made people think that iron fortified foods were good? How come they didn't see they were so toxic? It's really interesting. So they did like a study on pregnant women, I want to say in the 50s or 60s, and they realized like some pregnant women had low iron according to their standards, right? And the interesting thing is, like, yes, your ferritin levels go down when you're pregnant, and so sometimes your hemoglobin does as well because your baby's using that stuff. That doesn't mean you're like low in iron. And then they started just fortifying the food for the whole population, even though they just did tests on some pregnant women and found that some pregnant women were possibly anemic. And then they kept trying to raise the amount of iron in the food higher and higher and higher. It started at like 1 milligram per pound of flour, and then it started moving up to like 16 milligrams and 20 milligrams. And they even tried to get it to be higher. And like, I can't remember what agency came back or like what group of scientists came back and said like, whoa, 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 this is way too much iron. Like, you're trying to poison people. And so it just kind of stuck. And there are certain countries that still require all flour that comes into the country to be fortified. It's really bad. It's weird how there's a lot of like misinformation that just spins out of control. I should definitely need to keep my, can't say too much on that, but yeah, it's kind of crazy how that works. All right, guys, any more questions? You guys have like a really good range of questions this week, but pretty much, to sum it up is don't stress too much about your food. Focus more on the big picture in regards to balancing your blood sugar, figuring out what foods are working best for you. What's the stuff that you're craving, first of all? Like, if you're having a hard time figuring out, like, what foods should I be eating? What are the foods you're craving the most? And then, what do those cravings mean? I did do that post a couple of weeks ago on cravings and how sometimes like cravings can lead us astray or lead us to where we need to go. But what foods are we craving? What foods do we want to be eating? And then how are those foods making us feel? And it's a constant experimentation. And if we've thought that we found it, a lot of people find that the reason why so many of you are like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? Is because a lot of you thought you had found it, and you followed a lot of people that acted like they had found it. And if we come to this conclusion that life is kind of always a journey, and we're kind of always figuring out what's working for us, and in different seasons of life it's going to be different things, it really takes the pressure off, because we realize we have to focus on our body in different ways in different seasons of life. There's going to be certain times where we can really focus in on our health, and then there's going to be certain times when we're just getting by, and that's okay. Like, that's totally cool. It's more about the big picture. Like, for me, I know that if I eat well but I don't get enough sleep, I'm still going to be really, really messed up. So I'd rather take a little bit more of a relaxed stance on my food and still get enough sleep and let that be enough. But that's just an example of, like, make sure you guys are constantly taking a step back, looking at the big picture, not getting too in your head, not getting too caught up on the details, and still enjoying your life. Like, this is enjoyment. We're allowed to enjoy our food. That's like how we want to look at it, and not as like, oh no, I'm doing something wrong, I need to change this. Like, there's no rush. Like, why are we in a rush to get to the destination that we're trying to get to? So I'm just trying to remind you guys that. I've tried to kind of make my content a little bit more relaxed because of that. I want you guys to not be so hard on yourself and not be putting so much expectations on your shoulders. That's not necessary. Like, we'll get to where we need to go. It's going to take some time. It's going to take the right steps, but just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and it's going to be okay. Okay, so I'll see you guys next Wednesday. And in the meantime, if you guys want to see specific content or things like that, you can always leave a comment or send a DM. And even if we don't get back to you, we're reading those things and we're writing down the notes so that eventually I will create that content. And remember, the YouTube channel is just getting started. So that's another place where if you have content that you want to suggest, just let us know. All right, you guys, I'll see you next week on Wednesday.